Hello, welcome to Jessie at Home and the Stitchopedia. In this Stitchopedia, I'm going to show you how to make tassels that you attach them while you're making them, as opposed to making them and then tying them on or sewing them on. They're attached while they're made, and they don't require weaving in ends into your work. The ends are kind of worked into the tassel as well, and you can even work them over top of an existing end on the piece that where you are attaching your tassel. So what I have here is some bunting that I've made. Okay, it's just some red, white, and blue bunting I have for my patriotic crochet along and knit along, and I am adding tassels onto the bottom of this bunting. I am using Lion Brand Kitchen Cotton, which is 100% cotton. This sort of tassel works really well with a yarn that kind of grips onto itself. If you have a yarn that's a little more slippery, like a silk or a yarn, even a cotton with a really fine finish on it, you might need to tie some knots or whatever into your ends in order to make it work. But the way that I'm doing this, everything works really nicely with a yarn that kind of grabs onto itself like a kitchen cotton does. Okay, so what you need in order to make your tassels, obviously you have your yarn here. You need whatever you're attaching your tassel onto, which in this case is this little pennant, this little flag of my bunting. So I have my little piece of bunting that I am attaching my tassel onto. And it's okay if it has an end or two where you're attaching the tassel. You need your tassel pieces. You decide how many you need. What you want to do is kind of fold it in half and decide if it looks like the right amount of tassel for you. And your tassel pieces need to be twice the length of the tassel that you want, plus an additional 4 inches. That way, when it's folded in half, it's the size of your tassel plus 2 inches to account for any variation in the ends and give you a nice place to cut from. You also need one more long piece that is going to be our tying piece, and this tying piece needs to be twice the length of the tassel plus a foot. Okay, twice the length of your tassel plus 1 more foot. So that's what your tying piece is. You need a crochet hook to pull some things through. You need a yarn needle to do some finishing work, and obviously you need some scissors to clip things up at the end. So here is my piece all ready for my tassel, and this is where I want to attach my tassel. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place my crochet hook through where I want the tassel to be attached. So I want the tassel to be attached at the point of this bunting, so I just need to find my way through. Alright, so you just kind of have to finagle it in there, figure out where you are. There we go. That's a nice spot for me. Now you're going to take your tie piece, the long piece that's twice the length of the tassel plus a foot. You are going to fold it in half. So I've lined up my 2 ends and pulled it to go ahead and find my halfway point. You're going to place that halfway point onto your crochet hook and pull it through right where you want your tassel. Okay, so I pulled that through. I have that loop still on my hook, and now what I'm going to do is grab these 3 ends. It's the 2 ends from my tie piece plus the end I already had from my bunting flag, and I am just going to wrap those around my hook and pull them through the loop that was on my hook. Okay, and now I'm going to pull that kind of tight so that everything is nice and secure, and I have attached my tie pieces onto my bunting right where I want my tassel. Now what you need to do is, here's my tail piece that was already there, and I have my 2 tie pieces, and you just need to separate the tie pieces, one to one side and one to the other. We can get this crochet hook out of our way. We're not using that again. Now that I've done that, I need to find my tassel. Here's my tassel pieces. You need to find the center. Here is my center, and place the center right where the tassel is attaching. Okay, so we have a tail piece on each side, and here is the center of my tassel pieces. I'm now going to take my tail piece and tie a square knot. Okay, so a square knot goes right over left and then through the loop. Pull it tight, and then left over right through the loop. Pull it tight. Okay. Now I'm going to leave one of my tie piece ends hanging out. I'm going to pull everything else down and clip. If my tail end is still long, which in this case it happened to be pretty much exactly the same length as the tassel, that worked out nicely. You want to clip that, but the other tie length, the other tie end you're going to need to clip just so it's about the same length as all the tassels, so you only have one long end left. That way you're not confusing yourself. Now, get all of these pieces, including your one long end, kind of nice and neat. It might take a little bit of kind of combing through with your fingers to get the top part at least nice and lying flat and kind of pretty. There we go. See? You got that all nice and pretty? Now you want to find the end of your tie piece, which I managed to somehow tie a knot in already. That was weird. Okay, end of your tie piece, and put it onto your yarn needle, however you like to thread a needle, which always works better for me when there's not a camera on. Okay, so we've got that on there. Now you are going to pinch so that the tip, you're going to pinch from the top so the tip of your fingers are where you want the end of your tassel wrap to be. So let me show you this. Here is a tassel. Maybe I'll show you on a white, it might be easier. Here is a tassel. And you see here's the hanging part, here's the top part, here's the wrap. You need to pinch so that from the top so that the tip of your fingers are where you want the bottom of that wrap to be. Okay, that is where you are going to pinch your tassel. So I'm going to take my tassel, I'm going to pinch, hold everything nice and tight in my fingers, and then I'm going to find this piece, because this is my wrapping piece, and get it pulled out. Alright, so it's still attached all the way to the end of my fingers where I've pinched, but after that point I have it out. And now I'm going to start wrapping around. And you just want to wrap really, really tightly around, working your way up the tassel. Okay, as high up as you want to go. Once you're at the point where you want to stop, you're going to pinch your wrap and take your end. You are now going to take your yarn needle and run it through on top of your wrap. Here's my wrap. I'm going to place it right on top of the wrap and go all the way through to the opposite side, just on top of the wrap again. Okay, all the way through to the opposite side, just on top of the wrap. Pull that through. Pull it tight. Alright, so there's my wrap. Now, I'm going to look where my yarn came out. See where my yarn came out? I'm going to put my needle back in, not in the same spot. I'm going to go over so that I actually catch a little, you see this little piece of yarn here? I'm going to go over to the other side of that piece of yarn just so that I'm catching something, and I'm not going back in the same exact spot. And you are going to go down through the center of your tassel so that the point of your needle is coming out of the center of your tassel. See the point of my needle right there? It's coming out through the center of my tassel. And now you're going to pull that through. You might need to kind of wiggle a bit. You want to hold on tight to your wrap and just kind of wiggle things a bit to pull it through. And now you're just going to take your time and pull through nice and tight. Now you can take your needle off of your tail because now you have a tassel. It's all attached. Okay? You don't have any ends to weave in. All you have to do is clip it. You can measure them all to the same length. I get kind of lazy and I use one to measure all of them. So I made the first one, decided how long I wanted it to be, and I use the first one every single time. I use the same tassel to measure each and every tassel. That way if I make a little mistake on one of them, I'm not expanding on that mistake each and every time. So I always use the same tassel as my measuring tassel. There we go. Clip it off, and ta-da, we have tassels. Lots of tassels, all attached to our pieces as we made them without having to weave our knitting work back in. Okay, so I hope you have found that helpful. Thank you for watching.